All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Great Data State Series, Nebraska. We're very excited to have you here with us. We're going to start in just a few minutes, just to give everybody time to come in. But in the meantime, please introduce yourself in the chat. Give us your name, your role and organization, and where you are right now. And we will get started shortly. All right. So as you're coming in, please introduce yourself in the chat, your name, organization, and where you are currently. Welcome to the Great Data State Series, Nebraska. We are very excited to have you here. This is our second stop on the Great Data States tour. Last time we were in Wisconsin. This time we are here in Nebraska, and we are thrilled that you've joined us today. We are here, Project Unicorn, CETA, and we are talking with the Nebraska Department of Education today. We are grateful for everybody's participation and involvement in this event, and we are excited to get started. So I'm going to pass things over to Susan to begin us here today. So thanks very much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Bearden. I'm the Director of Digital Programs for Innovate EDU, and I work on Project Unicorn, which is Innovate EDU's project dedicated to supporting and promoting the use of data interoperability in K-12 space. And we are thrilled to have you here today and to have two fabulous presenters. You'll hear from Jill and Christina, and they're going to talk to you all about the great work that's being done in Nebraska around data interoperability. But just to kind of set the stage, interoperability, of course, is the seamless, secure, and controlled exchange of data between applications. And what's always amazing to me is so often states or districts will implement an interoperable data system to solve a specific problem, but then they discover that that infrastructure allows them to solve additional problems that they hadn't even envisioned. And so that's one thing I'm really excited about exploring and learning more about today with the fabulous work that Nebraska is doing. Just wanted to let you know, we also partnered with the fabulous team from CETA in our first webinar in the Great Data State series, and that was with Wisconsin. And Jonathan has just popped a link to that webinar in the chat. So I know several of the folks in attendance today were at that webinar, but if you weren't, please go ahead and bookmark that webinar for viewing after this one. We're very excited to share the great work that's being done in Wisconsin as well, and we are thrilled to partner with the fabulous folks at CETA, who are just some of my favorite people. So we're glad you're here. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. Would love to have everybody here, whether you are at a district or at a vendor, to sign the Project Unicorn Pledge. So the Project Unicorn Pledge is just your organization's way of stating that you are committed to upholding the principles of interoperability and moving towards leveraging interoperable solutions. We have over 650 districts that have signed the pledge. And Jonathan, do you know off the top of your head what our current vendor count is? We've been getting a fair number of new signatories lately.
A lot of new ones. I don't know off the top of my head, but a couple hundred at least.
Excellent. Yeah. So we would love to have you join us. So you can check out the link on the Project Unicorn website to sign the pledge. Also wanted to invite those district and state agencies to take the school system data survey. You'll find the link on the screen. The SSDS, that we call it, is baseline survey. It probably takes about 15-20 minutes to complete, in which you can answer questions about your system's readiness to implement interoperable solutions. And we are using the data from the survey to build a report about sort of a state of the sector, discussing fully anonymized data from the survey. And you'll also get an opportunity to set up a call with someone from Project Unicorn to discuss your school system's data profile or your state's and how we might be able to help you move forward. So if you have a moment, please take the Project Unicorn School System Data Survey on your screen. And without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to our fabulous facilitator for today, Christina Ishmael. Christina, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good morning to folks that are here in Pacific time or Mountain time, even Central time. Our East Coasters, good afternoon. My name is Christina Ishmael, and my pronouns are she and her. I am joining you all from Tacoma, Washington, on the traditional lands of Coast Salish and Puyallup peoples. It is a pleasure to be helping facilitate this second webinar and going home. I previously had the opportunity to work at the Nebraska Department of Education, so it's like going home. And even Jill, when I first saw her, when we connected for our prep session, it was like, hi, and let's just talk about all the things. So this feels so good and so comfortable. So please allow me to kind of just relish this moment. But we are thrilled that you all are joining us today to hear about the work that Nebraska Department of Education has been doing around interoperability. So we are going to just do that. We're going to hear directly from Jill. She's going to talk us through all of the work that they've been doing over the past several years. And then we'll move into a facilitated question and answer session. We have the 3 big questions that we asked of our Wisconsin folks last month. And so we will ask the same questions. And then we will also move into a Q&A with you to facilitate any sort of questions that may be coming up. We also have some other folks that are here with us that will help answer these questions, not only from Jill's perspective at NDE, but also from some supporting agencies and organizations that have helped in their process. So just wanted to give you a little heads up there. Thank you for saying hello in the chat. It's so nice to see some familiar friends and faces and names. So please feel free to continue using that chat feature while we hear from Jill. And we will save those questions. So as you kind of think of the questions as you're hearing her talk through, please feel free to populate those in the chat, but we will save those till the very end after we hear directly from Jill. Okay, so our community agreements for today will be, let's see, there we go. Okay. We know that we have a finite period of time with you, so please stay engaged with us. Speak your truth in that chat feature. Experience discomfort. I don't think we're going to experience too much discomfort, but we may be challenging some of your preconceived notions. Provide equity of voice. Make sure that we get to hear from everyone as much as possible in the chat. And then because we have a finite period of time, we're going to expect and accept a lack of closure. However, we will give you our email addresses, which is always dangerous, so that you can contact us afterwards should you have any follow-up questions, want to have conversations with us. Please feel free to do so. We could not do this work without the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, so we want to thank them for all of their work, for providing the funding to make this happen. So CETA has some specific kind of work streams. Project Unicorn has some work streams with them, as well as CCSSO and 14 other partner organizations, where we've all been working on this as a collective. So we really want to make sure that we honor not only their funding, but their support in all of this. So thank you to Michael and to the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. At CETA, we have started a specific working group on data modernization. And the goal of this grant project really started back in the fall of 2020. In the midst of everything, why not start a new project? So the goal of this grant project is to leverage CETA's national network of state ed tech and digital learning leaders to empower SEAs, or the state ed tech directors, to identify and implement specific ways that they can use their purchasing power and procurement processes to increase vendor adoption of state standards and can use their purchasing power to increase vendor adoption of data standards. Woo! This effort will ensure that products purchased by the state agencies make data easily and securely available for appropriate use across the agency and within school districts. So the idea is to help set the stage at that state level, encouraging the local level to participate as much as possible, and then provide that free flow of data exchange between the different agencies. Getting a quick pulse on what's happening in our schools is always important for us to consider. You've already heard who I am. So I'm Christina Ishmael. I lead special projects at CETA, and I am joined today by Jill Arend, the Assistant Administrator at Nebraska Department of Education. Hi, Jill. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks. Jill, I'm going to let you just kick it off. Tell us all about the things.
Okay, so I am Jill Arend. I am the Assistant Administrator in the Office of Data Management and Application Development here at the Department of Education. And I have been with this department for almost 25 years now. So my background at NDE is very diverse. I started out in school finance, moved over into application development, moved over into data, and now am in my role of assistant administrator and also basically the data lead here at the department, managing all of our data. So I've been here for a while. I have seen a lot. When I started with the state, we were collecting our data and student data in aggregate. We eventually did move on to collecting it at the student level in a file upload process. We did that for about 10 years, but about a little over halfway through that process, we came to the realization that something else needed to be done. And kind of where that realization came from was actually a study that we did. It was actually the legislature here back in 2013, I believe, had a legislative resolution, and they said that, okay, we're going to study the education data systems here in Nebraska. What kind of impact do they have on our districts? How are they, what are they costing the districts? How are they affecting the districts? So that study was done, was finished in 2014, and I think they're going to drop a handout out there for you to see that basically shows you the results of that study. And this does, trust me, it does lead to this data modernization and interoperability conversation. So what we found from this study was that our school districts were spending over $100 million a year. And this was, 7 years ago on data and systems. And 3/4 of that was on the systems themselves, but they were spending $25 million a year, or 655,000 staff hours just submitting data to us. And that data was just the data needed to meet accountability purposes, the state reported data that we have to report to EDFACS, we use for determining accountability, we use for special education, etc. So we had districts just spending a ton of hours just working on making sure they got the data to us, and the data that they got to us was accurate. So we also found in this study that a lot of our smaller districts in particular, really their systems, they had a minimal number of systems. And one of the areas that a lot of our smaller districts could not afford to do was some sort of teacher dashboard, a dashboard that will allow our teachers to see the students and see all of the data aggregated in one place around their students. They were having to go multiple places, create spreadsheets. So this study kind of pointed out to us the need for a lot of different changes that to occur. And so we also around the same time had gotten the new SLDS grant. So, and part of that was around providing these teacher dashboards. But this study also pointed out the need really to streamline the data submission process. So fortunately, the two of those married together quite well. A lot of the data that we needed for these dashboards we were going to be doing was also data we needed for state reporting purposes. And so we then decided, okay, so what can we do to solve this problem? And we had been looking and working with EdFi in particular around how we could get these dashboards put up. And we're working with a group of pilot districts for this process. And at the same time the study came out, they were coming to us saying, hey, we're submitting all this data to you for the dashboard. Why can't we just use it for state reporting purposes? And the two of them together were like, yeah, that's just the perfect combination here. So we went ahead and started looking into and started going through the process of what data do we need to get, not just for this dashboard, but also what data do we need to get in order to meet all of our state reporting requirements. And we went through all of the mapping for that, started getting a lot of, all the information listed out. We knew then we were going to have to work with our student information system vendors to connect, because EdFi is a system that sends data via an API into the system here at the state. We do not have a single student information system vendor in the state. We have multiple vendors. So we started working with these vendors to make sure that they were EdFi compliant, that they had that ability to send the data in. And so we went out, we certified vendors to be able to do this. We got them hooked up. We spent a couple of years doing pilot and parallel data submission systems before we finally went fully production in the 2018-2019 school year. Some other states that have done EdFi, they have done maybe rolled out more quickly, but they rolled out simply pieces of their student data collection, as opposed to what we did was kind of all in. So, like I said, 18-19 was the first year that we went completely production with this. And we started getting all this data in, and it was really, really quite amazing. I have talked to districts back when we had our system where we were getting data at the aggregate level. We tried to tell districts, hey, this is going to make things easier for you. You're going to have better data. And what we would hear from them is, yeah, we feel like the data is better, but it's not easier. This is more difficult for us because they had to create files. They had to upload them multiple times throughout the year. Then they had to go in and check the data quality. And I heard from, and I'll be honest, it was one of our largest districts. They actually came to me and said that once we started with EdFi and started getting the data in this data flow system, that it really was truly easing the burden on the districts. It was easier for them to get the data to us. If the data is right in their student information system, it's right in our system. So, and that's a win-win, because we know we have the correct data for what we need to do, and they know they have the correct data for everything they need there at the district purposes. So now we have this system. We're getting data from the school district student information systems. We're also getting data from a statewide special education system that a lot of our districts, particularly our smaller districts, used. And by also connecting that system, districts did not have to, were using that instead of their student information system for special education. Those districts did not have to load the data into their SIS to give it to us. So we had that separate connection. And that vendor happens to be part of our educational service unit, which is our intermediate education agency. They were able to then submit all the special education data. Again, marrying it all into one place. They have it all in one system, and they don't have to worry about transferring it to their student information system in order to get it to us. here at the state. So we've got there. We have got our data into the operational data store, or the ODS. Our implementation of EdVi is called Advisor, and it has a very interesting name, Advanced Data Views Informing Student Education Response, which it's better than the first name they came up for it, which was Squirrel. But hey, it's there. But no, it is. It really is intended entirely around helping the districts, at the same time, not just helping them provide data for them and making their decisions, but also helping them free up time to do things at the district level instead of spending their time submitting data to us. So we're getting that interoperability going. We are submitting data directly from the student information systems into Advisor to us. So once we got that, we started, okay, what else can we do? What else can we do that is interoperable? And the first area we ended up, one of the biggest areas we ended up looking at for you that are in other states is submission to EdFacts. And if there is a burden for districts to take their data and get it prepared to submit to us, there's a burden for states to take data and get it prepared to send up to the federal government through the EdFacts system. So we also started taking a look at Generate, which is a tool that is started out being developed by the Center for the Integration of IDA Data, and initially was around submitting special education files, creating those EdFacts files and reports. And we thought, well, what if we could utilize this system to then create our EdFacts files? Now, if you're not familiar with Generate and with the system, it is a SEDS-based data standard and database. So if you have your data in the SEDS IDS, or the Generate IDS, you can then create your EdFacts files. So we actually talked to Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, and they about this, and we said, okay, any state that's an EdFi state could benefit from some process that takes that data from the ODS and puts it into this Generate IDS, and then in turn can create all these files that we can utilize to submit to the federal government and through the EdFacts system. So we actually worked for quite a while with the same team that works on Generate about creating this connection between our operational data store for EdVi and the Generate IDS. So that has actually now been made available to other states. So any state that's EdVi, go out and get this, what they call a plugin, and could install it and could help ease our own burden as far as creating these files and getting them submitted. So that was one of the big areas to me, and I'm a former EdFacts coordinator here. To me, that was a huge win. We're still working on getting more and more files implemented and data checked to make sure they're done and done correctly. We've pledged to continue updating this plugin for the EdFi community so that they can also participate in this. So that is intended to be an ongoing effort. Another area that we have started working with for interoperability is through assessment data. So all districts in the state public districts in the state are required to submit to the department via one of our rules some of their formative assessment data. So we already get statewide assessment data, and our statewide assessment vendor for our grades 3 through 8 assessments is NWEA. So part of our agreement with them is then in turn providing the NWEA MAP formative assessments to all districts in the state. So now we have all districts using NWEA MAP. Well, why have them turn around and put the data in their SIS and send it to us if we can just get that data directly from NWEA? So we worked with NWEA. we are now receiving NWA map data directly into, you guessed it, the ODS. We don't have to go and have them submit data or import. Now they're still getting their own data so that they can do the work with their students, utilize the information. We're also getting the data that we need for meeting some of their requirements. We're also getting the data so that we can in turn use it to help us inform decisions. Our research team is taking that data. Our special education team is taking that data and utilizing it to help drive some of the decisions and some of the ideas around what it is we can do to help the districts and help us measure what's going on. They're actually working now on something utilizing this data to help measure the effects of COVID. How did COVID affect these kids? Again, interoperability. We don't have to work on getting those files, creating them, or we're not receiving them and having to upload them. It's flowing automatically. And then the next area that we're working on is really starts affecting the districts again in a positive way. And that is rostering. So we are taking, and we're now going to start in 21-22. Nebraska's doing something a little different with our statewide assessments. I'm not an assessment person, so I don't have all the details on how it works, but it's called through-year assessment. Instead of assessing just one time in the spring, the assessment is somehow done throughout the year and kind of tied to the MAP testing. And so, again, if you want details, you're going to have to go to our assessment office. But how it affects me and our team is that some of our districts have they have all the systems in place to roster for their MAP assessments. Other districts, it's more difficult. And again, it's the smaller districts, the ones who really kind of need more support. So we are going to start an auto rostering, and the data is going to go, it's already in the ODS. Almost all the data needed is already in the ODS. So NWA, we've been working with them to come in on a nightly basis and pull the data they need so that at a time that a district wants to go out and create a roster to do NWA testing, the data will be updated as of the day before. So the only kids they're going to miss are the kids who are enrolled today. So it'll be there on a nightly basis. We're going to be working on that. We're going to start with just a few districts, and by the end of the year, we want to have it fully implemented with the last NWA test season, I guess you would call it, MAP season. So again, another area where we are working on that interoperability. We're doing other things too. We are working with Microsoft actually on an additional project around creating some business intelligence reports, utilizing the data that's in the ODS. And we're now working with them on some AI-related determinations around trying to glean information out of this. Again, utilizing the data, almost most of the data that comes in from the ODS. So we've definitely been busy. I'm trying to think what else you might like to hear about. We really feel like that going back to that study that was done, looking at the amount of time it takes districts to submit data, and looking at the fact that we do have districts who just don't have the resources to provide some of that, additional, the dashboards, the rostering, trying to really help them with all of that. There actually is another link that I think they can share in the chat to the page that has all of our resources around these data studies. There was a further data study that was done to kind of follow up on how that first data study went. And it did talk about how I think the number of hours had gone down by like 25% on the amount of hours they were needing to do. And this was in 2019, mind you, was when this finished up. And that was really only after our first year. of being in production. At that point, I think you could almost say, because the year before that, 17-18, we had a parallel year, which if anything increased the district's burden. They were doing it in both ways. So I really think that even though that study shows a 25% reduction in the number of hours it took them for accountability assessments, I really think if we were to do that study here coming up in a year or two, we would find even a further reduction in that. Again, saving the district's time, saving the district's money, allowing them to do more locally at their district level rather than just meeting state requirements. We are also working on improving and enhancing and making these dashboards better. We've been working on that now for a little while now. And we also, as part of all of this process, we set up a what we called our, it was basically a help system that involved not just our local help desk, but we started working with our educational service units to provide additional assistance, and we train them about advisor and the data, and then they can go out and also train the districts on this. Because some of it is, why isn't this piece of data showing up? Well, it's this setting in your student information system. We don't know that because we have 6 different student information systems in the state that submit data into the ODS. We don't know all the intricacies. The districts, the ESUs, and have a lot more information around that. So we've also spent a lot of time doing that. It's called the virtual support team, that connection between NDE's help desk and the ESUs. And that has been a big part. The train the trainer model, especially a big part in what we've done to also provide that support out to the district. So we continue to look for more ways to do interoperability, and that is, it's kind of like a goal. We are working on more and more BI to sit on top of the ODS to provide analytics and information back to the districts so that they can learn new things about their own students and what they can do to help the students. And it's really going to be something that continues, I think, for definitely the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Jill. So many different pieces of this. There's like tentacles that just keep coming out further and further. A few questions that I have for you. You already answered the one around kind of the technical assistance and like the train the trainer model, which I think is really helpful in thinking about, the size of the state, of course. But when you have something set in the structures as far as like that intermediary, and most every state has some sort of intermediary, whether it's called a service agency, or in California, it's their county offices of education. In New York, it's the BOCES, like whatever the name may be. They serve as kind of the folks in between before you get to that local level. Can you tell us a little bit more about like how that partnership has worked as far as the train the trainer model, and how people are kind of determined as part of this virtual team?
Well, really what we've done is, so there are, at one point there were 19 educational service units. I think we're down to around, we had some mergers. I think we're down to around 16 or so educational service units in the state. And so each of the educational service units provides at least one person who helps participate in these train the trainer models. And then they can we actually have, well, prior to COVID, we would actually go out to the ESUs and hold workshops, and workday workshops where people could come out. It allowed the people who are checking the data time to really get away from the office and be able to focus on doing data quality and looking at the data that was in the ODS. We did create a whole website that sits on top of our operational data store, our EdFi system, that shows the districts their data and maybe what data quality issues they may have, so that they can go in and make some corrections to their data to make sure it's accurate. We have errors and warnings in it, because no matter how hard you try, they're still bad. Of course. So they've really learned they really work with the districts on looking at that and looking at their data, a lot of it through that website, to make, clearing up your errors. The districts are they want every single one of those errors gone.
Yep.
They just don't want them there. So, because they want their data
sort of
to
like
be
the
right.
red flags or whatever else, you're like, I don't want to see it on screen.
Yep.
So that was actually going to be one of my questions around data quality. That came up with the folks in Wisconsin, is that they have someone kind of, I think, charged with really looking at the actual data quality itself. Do you have someone on your team that's looking at that, or what does that look like?
So for our system, one of the things we implemented, and we actually started this prior to EdFi in our old system, is we have set aside the last 2 weeks of every collection window, because even with this system, we still have times where we stop collecting data. At this point, the data is done. The last 2 weeks before that date is now called an audit window. And we have people, the districts are supposed to be looking at it, but we also have basically recruited program people within the department to look at their own data. So the Part B data manager over in special education is looking at the special education data to see if it looks accurate. We make sure that, we also have people on our team in the data side who work specifically with the program. So we have one person, they work with multiple programs, but the person who is in special education knows who they can go to help them with this. And all the different programs have that opportunity. And they all know that those last 2 weeks in particular, although they can start earlier, they need to be looking at their data to make sure it looks correct. And if something looks wrong, let's contact the district. Say, hey, you're not looking at this error, or hey, this isn't an error, but are you sure it's right? It just, the numbers look funny. And talking to them, and we're having that outreach. Not only are they reaching to us, the district's reaching to us, we as a department and the different programs are reaching out. And that in itself is at the department is really work that's done between our help desk, our data team, and the program offices.
Okay, that's great. So when this first started rolling out, obviously it was, kind of catalyzed by the legislative study. Congratulations to the Nebraska legislature for starting that. That's not something we normally like, hey, good job, legislature. A very unique legislature, mind you, with the unicameral. Here's your fun Nebraska facts for today. I'm curious though, like, what did rollout and communications with districts? You mentioned pilot districts. What did recruitment look like for some of these districts? Did you do a mix of small, kind of rural, some suburban? Can you talk us through kind of that process?
Yeah. So for the pilot process, we kind of basically asked districts to apply, and pretty much we were able to accept all the districts that applied. We did look for a mixture of different student information system vendors. So we had most of the student information system vendors represented in the pilot, so that we knew that it was going to work not just for this vendor, but for all of them. And then after that, we started something called an early adopters program, where districts could, we said, we were working with the pilot districts starting back during the 15-16 school year. The 16-17 school year, we started opening up to early adopters. And again, we were still in basically a pilot mode. This was not going to be the way they submitted their data. They're still going to submit their data the old way, but they could start coming on board, learning the system, doing it at their own pace. By the last year, 17-18, when we were in full parallel, we really at that point encouraged every single district to come on board. We had a few, always. We had a few decided, nope, not going to. But nearly all of our districts had come on board and were submitting data via that, the 17-18 year. We had meetings, at first pilot meetings, and then early adopter program meetings where the pilot districts would also join us to talk. We did that every week or two, just kind of whatever needed to be done, talking. We also worked very closely again with the student information system vendors, had regular meetings with them. We still have a process where every year we certify our SIS vendors to be able to submit data into the next school year. So we make them go in and we test their submission process every year, because every year it changes a little bit.
Sure.
So the communication, and we had communication coming from the commissioner to the administrators all the way down to our help desk, talking to the data stewards out in the districts. So that was really kind of getting a message from top to bottom about how this was going to be the way it was, but also how it was going to help you as a district once it was up and going.
Okay, that makes sense. We know that there are multiple sets of standards when it comes to data standards. How did you all choose to work with EdFi?
Well, first of all, I think that EdFi they already had a dashboard up in Texas. So we knew that was there, that was going to work. And it really was our first look. We were looking for the dashboard. But so we went out, EdFi was advantageous to us, partly because licensing, there's no cost to that, but also it was already tied to CEDS. And we knew that anything that was tied to CEDS could then work with anything else that was also tied to CEDS. So we don't really consider EdFi to compete at all with SEDS. They are, they really are complementary. They are a connection. And so that it really kind of made it an easy process, I think, for us to make that decision.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, folks. We have time to ask questions now. So if you have questions, please feel free to start dropping those in the chat for Jill to answer. I have a couple of more questions, of course, that I am happy to continue the conversation here. But you had mentioned, obviously, the desire to have a teacher dashboard, or a public-facing dashboard, I should say.
No, this is not. It's a teacher dashboard, not public facing.
It is a teacher dashboard. Okay. So I taught in Nebraska. I taught in several districts in Nebraska. What would I see on that dashboard?
So as a teacher, what you would see is you would be able to go in. Let's put you in as an elementary school teacher. You would see your entire classroom. You would see information on their attendance. You would see information on how they've done on their MAP assessments, information on even to some extent on their discipline, if your district chose to show that to you. We did when we decided to put discipline data in there, we did say districts had to have the option of not allowing their teachers to see the details, because there's that level of security. You don't know. And so obviously everything around there, you would know that they were in special education. You would know what, trying to think what else to come up with here.
I think
so their assessments, their attendance data was another big one. How are they doing there? How much school are they missing? And then we actually had an early warning system in there. Probably even more data available to your high school teachers, because then you get into submitting the grades. We didn't always require grades to be submitted, and a lot of the elementary schools were on standard-based grading, which the system didn't handle. We're starting to look at getting it to handle that. But the high schools, grades for the kids and their ACT scores and all of that.
Okay, that's awesome. So Victor asked if there is any data available for external exploration by the public and/or vendors.
So the data, yeah, we do have the Nebraska education profile, which is where you can see our public data. A lot of the data from there is pulled from our, yeah, and there's someone put the link to it in the chat. A lot of the data from there is pulled from either our ODS or from our assessment data. Obviously, there are some issues with it, not issues, but there are some uniqueness about it from the 1920 school year. You'll see some, hey, yeah, we don't have this data because there's no assessments.
Right.
But
Right.
that is where we currently have all of our public information.
Yep.
There's also a download area where you can go download files. Our researchers like that area. You go out and get information that's available to the public, information that's available to them. It is masked because, again, this is public information.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, how, actually, to kind of follow up on that then, so who has access to these data internally even? Like, I know that comes up as far as like a process within the agency often where you're like, okay, so this team is working on this, you have access to this because there is personally identifiable information.
Yeah, so for our process there, we do have the validation website the districts use.
Okay.
NDE staff can have access. It's not global. We basically they have to get signed off by their supervisors, by their leads, to make sure that they have the right to have the access. That we tie it down there, both at the district level and the state level, of whether or not they can see particular areas like free reduced lunch data and special education data. Not everybody can see that. Yeah. And so we also do have an area where both the districts and, again, select people at the state can see the Nebraska education profile data, but unmasked. So that is available. We publish that before it goes out on the NEP so that the districts can see what their data will look like, and where it's masked, what it would look like if it wasn't masked. So they have an opportunity to review their data before it actually goes out on the NEP.
Okay. Because it's a specific ask around the type of data collected, I want to ask Victor's question before we move to Susan's. Do you collect college readiness data?
We, I think about the thing we do have is our statewide assessment data is is a college career ready in the ACT benchmark or the NWA 3 through 8. We have designed the top level of the results there to be an indicator of college and career ready.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. We love the term local control in states. Nebraska is no exception. So I remember this in my days as the digital learning specialist, when folks were like, hey, cool, what platform do you use? And I was like, oh, I don't know, I can't tell you. I mean, I can tell you of all of the offerings, but can never force anyone to make any sort of certain decision. So Susan's question around what are some of the advantages as far as being able to work with all of the SIS vendors versus, selecting one. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. You're right. Local control. It is. It's local control. They can choose what SIS vendor they use. We did work with our educational service unit cooperative purchasing to come up with a basically where districts could buy in to the SIS to hopefully take advantage of that cooperative purchasing. That really, we also, not every SIS system is going to work well. The really big ones, the really fancy ones, have too much and cost too much for our smallest districts. But the ones that have a smaller cost, they may not provide all the features that the largest districts need. So that having that local control, allowing them to choose their student information system vendor is important there. Now, I will say again, local control. When we first started this process, some of the districts had concerns about us having data that we didn't need for statewide reporting purposes. So one of the things we did is we worked with the Educational Service Unit Coordinating Council, ESUCC, to actually have all of these servers located there and not at the state.
Interesting.
So the data, and it's still that way, all the data that's
Okay.
getting submitted is getting submitted to servers owned by the ESUCC rather than servers owned by the state. And then all the data that we can utilize is identified in our data guidance as state reportable.
Okay.
Now, the very technical people at the state still have access to the additional data because we need access in order to do our work.
Sure.
But the other people, like the program people, don't have access to that
Okay.
that's not needed for state reporting purposes.
Okay.
I do think that over the last few years we have, and I'm hoping this is true, I feel like we have really kind of proved to the districts that
Right.
they have our trust, that we're not going to utilize this data where we should not be. And I think that was definitely an important part, but they were concerned at the very beginning about giving us all this data. And so that was a great way of alleviating their concerns, kind of, again, giving them more control, but yet still allowing us to implement this system. We really couldn't have done this, I think, without the ESU, that middle layer. They help us with training, they help us in this area. It's just, they've been vital to this whole process.
Yeah, it sounds like, for sure. And then when you mentioned data governance, that's a whole other area. We could have a whole webinar on that, I think. But was that something that NDE helped kind of create the governance, the ESU coordinating council, combination of those two things?
Yeah, we definitely work hand in hand with the ESUCC. I mean, we provide them with, what are the server requirements for this.
Okay.
We, again, it's up to us. It's still up to NDE to decide what data we're collecting in the system, because we're the ones developing the dashboard. We're the ones using the data for state reporting purposes. It's still up to us here at NDE to identify what data is state reportable and what data is not.
Yep. Okay.
But the ESU, it was just moving that data off of NDE servers.
Yep.
There was also the idea there that it's no longer discoverable. And because public, data that comes to us is discoverable. Now, the vast majority of data that's there that is not state reportable is not data we'd be reporting out anyway, because of just its PII, it's security and privacy issues. But we also just kind of put that layer in there also. But it really was more than anything making the districts comfortable with this process, because it was different. We're connecting. We're getting direct connections to their SIS, and we're getting a lot more of their data now.
Okay. Then when you're collecting data, is it only from the public school systems in the state, or does that also include the private independent?
It does not include the private schools. That data is still coming in aggregate. So it is all the public schools. It is also our state operated or special purpose schools. So like our YRTC or youth treatment centers, and those systems are also submitting data this way. Okay.
Another Nebraska fun fact, it is one of 7 states that actually do not allow charter schools. So it is primarily public schools.
Yes.
245 districts, more or less?
244.
244. There you go. There's another consolidation.
Public districts. Yep, there was another consolidation.
Exactly. We are coming towards the end of our time here. If you have any other questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. But Jill, we want to thank you so much for your time, sharing all of the great work that has been happening in Nebraska. Again, as a former employee of the state and a former teacher in the state, I appreciate all of the work that you all have been doing to provide that quick pulse and like that access for teachers to be able to see what's happening in their classrooms and across their schools. So, Susan, I'm going to bring you back on stage if you're okay with that. Maybe. There you are. I see you popping up.
That works.
Anything to close this out, Susan?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for a really fascinating conversation. Jill, so appreciate your willingness to come in and spend your time with us and to share the great work that you're doing in Nebraska. We so appreciate your willingness to share. And of course, Christina, it's always so much fun to work with you. So I'm always very happy to have an excuse to collaborate. I would just say, just a quick reminder for folks, if you haven't done so already, please consider signing the Project Unicorn Pledge. You can see the URL on this slide. And thank you, Jonathan, for popping that up. We would love to have you sign the pledge. And then also would love to have districts and states, again, take the Project Unicorn School System Data Survey. And if you do, you'll get a chance. You'll not only be contributing to a body of work that's helping us understand the state of the sector with regard to interoperability, but you'll get a one-on-one consultation with the Project Unicorn team to review your results and help identify resources that can help you move forward on your interoperability journey. And thank you, Melissa. We have new CETA resource on interoperability. Thank you so much. Just want to say again how much we appreciate CETA and your willingness to collaborate with you. It's just always fun to work with the CETA team. So with that, I think we will say thank you for visiting the great state of Nebraska. I'm completely inspired. I want you to know, I've been to Nebraska, but I didn't get to see very much of the state. It was one of those things where I spent a night at a hotel and then continued along on I-80. So y'all have inspired me. I need to find an excuse to go visit the great state of Nebraska. So thank you so much for your time. Christina, anything you want to say to wrap things up?
No, I will say thank you all.
Yeah, our first graphic, we did have interoperability. It is for everyone. And that is definitely a play on Nebraska's tourism, which is Nebraska, it's not for everyone. So I would encourage you to go out and take a look at the tourism website and the information they have there, because there is a lot, you can, like we talked earlier before everybody joined us, there's Chimney Rock, there's floating in tanks down the Niobrara River. There is one of the top-rated zoos in the country in Omaha. So there is a lot to do in Nebraska.
It is not a flyover state. It is a great state.
Yes.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who joined us today and to the future folks who will be watching the recording of this webinar. We're so glad to have you join us on our great data states journey. Have a terrific day, everyone.
Bye-bye.